Welcome back to Stories Aloud, where we uncover the raw, unfiltered truths behind the world's most powerful ideas. Today, we explore The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, a masterclass in surviving the pain of building something from scratch. This isn't a story about success, it's a story about struggle, and why the hardest part of being a leader is facing the hard things no one prepared you for. Our aim today really is to get past those shiny startup stories we often hear. We want to unpack the really tough, hard-won lessons that Horowitz shares from his time leading Loud Cloud and Opsware. It's about understanding these deeper patterns, right? Not some simple checklist for success.
Absolutely. And you can tell just by looking at how the book is put together, he doesn't start you off gently.
No, not at all.
He jumps right into the deep end. I mean, the really serious stuff, the end game issues, firing people, layoffs, facing bankruptcy, it's quite jarring if you're expecting, a typical business book.
Right.
It comes from this core idea, almost like the Bushido principle he mentions. Keep death in mind, always.
Keep death in mind. Wow.
Yeah, the idea is if you, as the leader, constantly acknowledge the potential for failure, for the company's death, it forces a certain clarity, a focus. It makes sure you act properly with the right weight in everything you do.
It definitely grounds you in reality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Keeps you from floating off into strategic clouds.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that reality he calls the struggle. Can you paint a picture of that for us? For anyone listening who might be feeling it right now.
The struggle. It's visceral the way he describes it. It's that moment, or maybe it's a series of moments, where you wake up and realize the dream, the vision you had, it's turned into, well, a nightmare.
Yeah.
Your product's got issues. Maybe the market just vanished overnight. Good people are leaving. You see the bank account dwindling. It's this constant grinding feeling of dread.
It sounds utterly draining.
It is. And Horowitz is really clear about this. He found the single hardest thing, the most difficult skill he had to develop as CEO, wasn't finance or strategy. It was managing his own psychology.
Just keeping his own head straight through all that pressure.
Exactly. Because it's not just managing a P&L sheet. You're carrying the weight of people's livelihoods, their mortgages, their families. That's the real burden.
And he saw CEOs crack under that pressure in specific ways, didn't he? He identified these two failure modes.
Yeah, two classic and equally destructive ways leaders fail when they can't handle the struggle. The first is the terrorizing CEO.
Okay, what does that look like?
This is the leader who internalizes every single problem. It becomes personal. So they react with this frantic urgency, trying to fix everything. Now, they end up just running around, putting out fires chaotically.
Which probably just makes things worse.
Totally. They either terrorize the team with constant demands and shifting priorities so people just burn out and quit, or they turn inward, get consumed by anxiety, and become paralyzed. They're so focused on their own internal panic, they stop leading altogether. Lots of motion, no real progress.
So that's one extreme panic and chaos. What's the other side of that coin? The Pollyannish leader.
Ah, yes. This one can seem nicer on the surface, but it's just as damaging. This CEO basically can't handle the pain of the crisis. So what do? They rationalize everything.
They pretend it's not happening.
Pretty much. Or they minimize it. Oh, that missed sales target. Just a blip. Losing that engineer. We'll find someone better. They project this relentlessly sunny optimism that's completely disconnected from reality.
And the team sees right through it, I imagine.
Of course they do. The employees know the score, they see the problems piling up, and they see a leader who refuses to even acknowledge them.
Yeah.
So nothing gets fixed, people get incredibly frustrated, feel like they're shouting into the void, and eventually the good ones leave because they realize leadership is in denial. The culture becomes toxic.
It really highlights that intense emotional roller coaster. I'm reminded of that dark joke Mark Andreessen apparently told Horowitz.
Oh, the one about the only two emotions?
Yeah, exactly. Do you know the best thing about startups? You only ever experience two emotions, euphoria and terror. And I find that lack of sleep enhances them both.
It's funny because it's so true, right? That captures the whiplash perfectly. But, the most profound lesson Horowitz took from surviving that whole period, that struggle, was almost anticlimactic in its simplicity.
What was it?
He just said, I didn't quit.
Just enduring, staying in the fight.
Just not giving up. And interestingly, when he was dealing with that constant overwhelming anxiety, he found that some common advice, like asking, what's the worst thing that could happen, actually made him feel worse.
Really? Why?
Because the answer was genuinely terrifying. Bankruptcy, mass layoffs, personal ruin. Contemplating the absolute worst-case scenario didn't provide perspective. It just amplified the fear. It wasn't helpful for him.
Okay, so if dwelling on the worst didn't work, how did he cope? How did he manage those, existential fears day to day? What was his practical approach?
He realized he had to get it out of his head. The fear just churns internally otherwise. So his technique was basically to externalize it. Force himself to take those huge swirling anxieties and pin them down, write them down on paper.
Turn them into concrete problems.
Exactly. Transform the vague "we're screwed" feeling into specific addressable issues. Like, instead of just panicking about money, writing down, okay, if the EDS deal doesn't close by end of Q3, we are out of cash in Q4. What are the 3 specific actions we must take in the next 30 days to increase our chances of closing it?
So it shifts the focus from just feeling the fear to actually planning actions for survival.
Precisely. It moves you from being paralyzed by dread to actively working the problem, even if the problem is, potentially fatal to the company.
That internal battle is clearly crucial. But like you said, you can only manage your own psychology so much when the outside world is throwing curveballs. The The book really shifts then to how you handle failure publicly, right? Resetting trust. That Loud Cloud IPO experience seems like a perfect storm for that.
Oh, it was textbook. I mean, imagine the scene. They have this spectacular IPO, stock priced at $28, spikes instantly to $75. Suddenly, they're valued at nearly $3 billion. Pure euphoria, right?
The ultimate validation, you'd think.
Yeah, for about 5 minutes. Then, almost immediately, Microsoft makes this huge move, bundling Internet Explorer for free with Windows.
Which basically kneecapped Netscape, their core browser business at the time.
Exactly. It sent shockwaves through the entire market. And for LoudCloud, now a public company with thousands of shareholders watching every move, the market downturn meant their initial revenue forecasts were suddenly impossible, just completely out of reach.
So they hit this wall. They knew they couldn't make the numbers they'd promised, that $75 million forecast. What do you do then? How do you tell Wall Street without completely destroying any credibility you just gained? You shave a little off the forecast, hope things get better.
That was the dilemma. And this is where his controller, Dave Conte, gave him that legendary piece of advice. It's blunt, but brilliant. Conte told him, if you're going to eat shit, don't nibble.
Huh. Okay, that's memorable. Don't nibble. Explain the logic there. Why is that better than, say, gradually lowering expectations?
Because you've already damaged your credibility the moment you miss that first forecast. Your goal now isn't to save face, it's to stop the bleeding and rebuild trust. If you make a small adjustment, say, revise down from $75 million to maybe $65 million, and then things still don't improve, you have to come back again next quarter.
And issue a second correction.
Right. Down to maybe $55 million, at that point, you're toast. Investors assume you're either incompetent and don't understand your own business, or you're deliberately misleading them. All trust is gone.
So the don't nibble approach means?
Take all the pain at once. Be brutally realistic, even pessimistic. Cut the forecast dramatically all the way down to $55 million in this case in one go. Yes, the stock will get hammered now, but you maximize the chance that this is the only bad news you have to deliver on this issue. You reset the baseline extremely low, absorb the hit, and then hopefully you start beating those lowered expectations. You rebuild from a foundation of harsh truth.
That level of honesty, that brutal realism, it has to apply internally too, doesn't it? Especially when you're facing fierce competition. Horowitz talks about this idea of needing lead bullets, not silver bullets.
Yeah, that came later when the company was opsware. The stock had cratered, down to something like $2.90 a share. And a big reason was a competitor, BladeLogic, was just, well, as Horowitz put it, they were kicking our asses.
So naturally, people start looking for quick fixes, right?
Exactly. Everyone starts pitching ideas, clever marketing angles, a strategic pivot, some fancy partnership deal, the stuff Horowitz calls silver bullets, you know, the magical solution that will fix everything instantly.
I've all heard those pitches.
But Horowitz saw them as illusions. He realized the hard truth. There are no silver bullets for this, only lead bullets. Meaning the only way out was the hard way. No tricks, no shortcuts. They had to knuckle down and build a product that was fundamentally, undeniably better than BladeLogic's. It required grinding, focused, difficult engineering work. Lead bullets heavy, maybe slow, but they get the job done.
And crucially, he didn't try to shield the company from this reality, did he? He shared the burden.
That's maybe the most important part. He didn't stand up and give a rah-rah speech full of false confidence. He called an all-hands meeting, the whole company. And he laid it out, plain terms. We are getting our asses kicked. BladeLogic is winning. And if we don't stop the bleeding, we are going to die.
Wow. That takes guts, just to say that to everyone.
It does, but think about the effect. Instead of projecting that fake optimism we talked about earlier, he acknowledged the crisis presently. What does that do?
It builds trust, I guess. People appreciate the honesty.
Immense trust. And more than that, it focuses everyone. If the CEO is pretending things are fine, maybe people work on secondary projects or polish things that don't matter. But if the CEO says we are in an existential fight, then every single smart person in that company starts thinking about the core problem. How do we beat BladeLogic? How do we survive? You get all brains focused on the real issue.
That collective effort, that rallying cry, it hinges on courage, doesn't it? Not just from the team, but especially from the leader. Horowitz had that interesting insight from his childhood about heroes and cowards.
Right, that lesson about how they both feel the same, inside scared. The only difference is what the hero does. They act despite the fear. It's about discipline, not absence of fear.
And you really see that discipline, that courage under fire in the story about saving the EDS account, right? That sounds like it was make or break.
Absolutely critical. LoudCloud needed this massive EDS deal. Without it, bankruptcy wasn't a maybe, it was a certainty. And the situation was dire. They had just 60 days to get their system deployed and working in EDS's environment.
And the environment was difficult.
Difficult is an understatement. We're talking ancient technology, incredibly slow network links, like 56K dial-up speed slow, and crucially, the client staff at EDS were completely unmotivated, borderline hostile to the project. It looked impossible.
60 days to fix an impossible situation or die. No pressure.
None at all. But then one of his execs, a guy named Anthony, found this tiny, almost random sliver of hope. He discovered that the key decision maker at EDS, this executive named Frank, was personally miserable because he had to use this really obscure old piece of management software called Tangram. It was Frank's personal headache.
Okay, so nothing to do with LoudCloud's actual product.
Nothing at all. Tangram was niche, old, totally unrelated, but Anthony realized Frank hated dealing with it.
So the potential solution wasn't technical, it was psychological.
Political.
Exactly.
Solve Frank's personal pain point. And this led Horowitz to make one of the craziest, boldest decisions in the book. He decided to acquire Tangram.
Acquire the company just to get this one piece of software.
Yes, for $10 million. In cash and stock, which was a huge amount for them at the time. And here's the kicker. His entire management team thought it was a terrible idea, unanimously.
Why were they against it?
All the logical reasons. The Tangram tech was old, hard to integrate. The company was located way out in North Carolina, far from their base. It made no business sense on paper.
But Horowitz ignored them.
Completely. He ignored the unanimous advice, spent the $10 million, bought Tangram purely so he could walk into Frank's office at EDS and say, "Hey, Frank, you know that Tangram software that drives you crazy? We bought the company. We're giving you the software for free as part of our main deal. Problem solved."
And that sealed the EDS deal.
It saved the account, solved Frank's problem, built goodwill, got them over the line. It was an audacious, counterintuitive move based entirely on understanding the human element, not just the tech.
That is absolutely a hard thing, making a huge bet like that alone against all advice.
But the ethical challenges didn't stop there, did they? The Tangram acquisition brought another really difficult situation with their CFO, John Nelly.
Right, this is a really poignant story. Just between the time the acquisition agreement was signed and the deal actually closed, John Nelly, Tangram's CFO, received a devastating diagnosis.
Brain cancer.
Oh, terrible timing.
The worst. Because the deal hadn't closed yet, he wasn't technically an OpsWare employee. He wasn't yet covered by OpsWare's health insurance. And back then, especially, with a pre-existing condition like that, getting new insurance was impossible. Without continuous coverage, the medical bills would bankrupt his family.
So Horowitz is facing this awful human tragedy right when his own company is still incredibly fragile financially.
Exactly. Keeping Nelly on the payroll long enough for him to qualify for continued coverage under COBRA would cost OpsWare about $200,000, money they desperately needed. Legally, Horowitz had no obligation. Nelly wasn't his employee yet.
What did he do?
He paid it. He made the decision to spend the $200,000, keep John Nelly on the books just long enough to ensure his family had that vital health insurance coverage through COBRA.
Incredibly decent. But you can imagine someone arguing, from a purely financial perspective, that spending $200 you don't have when you're fighting for survival is irresponsible.
You could, but Horowitz saw it differently. He saw it as a fundamental leadership decision, crucial for the long term. His reasoning was crystal clear. He said later, "If I hadn't treated the people who were leaving fairly, the people who stayed would never have trusted me again."
Ah, so it wasn't just about John Nelly. It was a signal to everyone else.
It was about the bedrock of trust in the organization. Every single employee who remained, who was making sacrifices, needed to believe that the company and its leader would have their back if things went wrong for them personally. That $200,000 wasn't just an expense. It was an investment in the loyalty and trust of the entire workforce. Absolutely essential for surviving the next crisis.
Those kinds of decisions, they really define the culture, don't they? Which leads to this whole idea of building not just a successful company, but a good company. Horowitz was apparently quite strict about basic management practices, like that story about the one-on-one meetings.
Oh yeah, he was famously intense about managerial discipline. The story goes, he found out an executive just wasn't doing his regular one-on-one meetings with his direct reports, just blowing them off.
Which seems common, maybe, but Horowitz took it seriously.
Extremely seriously. He called both the executive and that executive's manager into his office and basically said, "If these one-on-ones are not happening within 24 hours, you're both fired."
Wow. That sounds harsh, almost draconian. Why such an extreme reaction to missed meetings?
Because for Horowitz, things like regular one-on-ones weren't optional HR fluff. They were fundamental building blocks of operational discipline. And that discipline, he argued, is what actually creates what he calls a good place to work.
Okay, define good place to work, in his terms. It's not just about perks.
No, not ping pong tables and free snacks. A good place to work, according to Horowitz, is an environment where employees can actually focus on doing their jobs, where they have confidence that if they get their work done well, good things will follow for them personally and for the company. There's clarity and purpose.
And the opposite of that, a poor organization.
We've probably all experienced that, haven't we? In a poor organization, you spend half your time, maybe more, just fighting the system, navigating internal politics, dealing with bureaucracy, trying to figure out who's responsible for what, battling organizational boundaries. It's exhausting and unproductive.
So his relentless focus on basics, like the one-on-ones, was actually about removing that friction, protecting people's ability to just do the work.
That's exactly his argument. It might seem harsh, like micromanagement, but he saw it as ruthlessly defending employees' time and focus from the chaos and inefficiency that creeps into poorly managed organizations. It wasn't about fear, it was about enabling effectiveness.
So building this disciplined good company isn't just a nice to have, it connects back to everything we've discussed. It's actually critical for survival. He sums up why it matters.
All right.
There were 3 key reasons.
Yeah, he lays it out quite clearly. First, having that strong, trust-based, disciplined culture is literally the difference between life and death when things inevitably go wrong.
Because things always go wrong, as he says.
Always. He challenges you to find any company in history whose stock price only ever went up. It doesn't exist. Crises happen. And when they do, in a good company, people pull together. In a bad company, the best people just leave at the first sign of trouble, which starts a death spiral.
Okay, so it's crucial for survival. What's the second reason?
The second builds on that in bad companies. When times get tough, the infighting and bureaucracy get worse, making it impossible to solve the actual business problems. People are too busy protecting their turf.
Makes sense. And the third reason sounds more philosophical.
It is. It's about the fundamental responsibility of leadership. He says being a good company is, in itself, an end goal.
An end in itself.
Yeah, think about it. He points out that people spend maybe 12, 14, even 16 hours a day working for your company. That's the vast majority of their waking life. As a leader, you have a moral obligation, he argues, to make sure that time constitutes a good life, to create an environment where people can thrive, not just endure.
That's a really high bar to set for leadership. A profound responsibility. It's interesting, though, how openly he talks about all this pain and struggle now. You mentioned there was a shift after he stopped being CEO.
That's a really important final point he makes. When he was actively running Opsware day in and day out, he felt an immense pressure to project what he called unrelenting confidence.
He couldn't show weakness.
He felt he couldn't. For the sake of the employees, the investors, the market, he had to be the steady, confident hand at the helm, even when he was terrified internally. He couldn't burden everyone else with his own deepest fears and doubts.
That must have been incredibly isolating.
Immensely. But it was only after the company was sold, after he transitioned to being a venture capitalist, that he felt that burden lift. Only then did he feel he had the freedom to speak honestly, openly, about just how agonizing and frightening that journey truly was. Writing the book was part of that process.
Which brings us right back to where we started, really. What this whole conversation highlights is that true leadership, the kind Horowitz describes, isn't about having all the answers or avoiding the tough times. It's defined by something else entirely.
It's about surviving those unpredictable, brutal lows. It's about having the sheer personal courage to make those incredibly hard, lonely decisions, spending money you don't have on an employee's healthcare, buying a company against everyone's advice.
Telling everyone you're getting your asses kicked.
Exactly. Doing all that while somehow, maintaining the trust and commitment of the people who choose to stay and fight alongside you. That's the hard thing about hard things.
The hard thing about hard things reminds us that leadership isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about staying strong when everything's falling apart. If this story resonated with your entrepreneurial spirit, share it and subscribe to Stories Aloud for more real stories behind great ideas. Until next time, keep listening.